Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to talk about what I believe to be the matrix of tempos that Bach utilized in his music. And I am going to explain how I came up with this matrix and why I think Bach used this matrix. All right, so many of you are familiar with my Bach tempo theory already, and you have probably seen me make reference to this mathematically ideal tempo matrix. What I believe to be the mathematically ideal tempo matrix is this table right here on the top. And this is another matrix of various numbers that I put here, which are based all on base 10 numbers. So I used, for example, 60 beats per minute, which is a popular tempo, or 80 beats per minute. So if you look in the fours, this is would be like the quarter notes. So if you have a quarter note of 120 or a quarter note of 60, notice in this matrix here, notice something. There's no base 10 numbers. So there's no numbers here with zeros at the end. Now look at this one. They all have zeros, or no, most of them have zeros, except there are some decimals in there, which I'll explain those in a few minutes. And then we have this matrix here. This one was derived from this matrix, and this is this matrix with no decimals. So I eliminated all the rows with decimals, and then I actually added one more row here where you can get all numbers without having decimals, and we have this matrix here. So I will explain that also in a couple minutes. First, before I do that, I want us to imagine being a composer. You are a composer, and you wish to utilize a proportional system of tempo in your music. And you go about trying to devise a sort of a matrix or rows and columns that describe these tempos. Okay, first off is most, I would say 99.9% of human beings prefer whole numbers, not fractions. So if one is devising a matrix of some kind, an ideal kind of matrix that you can use in your composition or whatever you're using it for, human beings do not want decimals or fractions. So you see all these values are decimals. So for example, 80, which is given very often as the tempo for the quarter note. Well, if 80 is on the quarter, then this is what the 16th note equals, the 8th. Well, then if you group this into threes at the same tempo it's moving here, you get a decimal. You don't want decimals. You want all whole numbers. So you're a composer, you're devising a system of proportional tempos. The first thing you're going to want to do is use a matrix that does not include decimals, because human beings don't want to deal with decimals. Human beings want whole numbers. All human beings want whole numbers. Now, the reason why you often see scholars or performers and teachers recommending a tempo like 60 is because it's a base 10 number, and human beings have 10 fingers. Human beings also like base 10 numbers. So these base 10 numbers come naturally to humans. Like You know, why would it be 42 when it could be 40? Well, that's another issue entirely. But let's move on and look at this particular matrix here. You see there's not one base 10 number in it, and yet it also it doesn't have any decimals, no fractional values. And do you see that? Let's look at this fours column, because that's the one that you're probably most familiar with. The fours column would be like a quarter note. So if you have a quarter note and at 36 beats per minute, quarter note 42, quarter 48. Okay, so let's imagine those being quarter note values. Do you see that every row, every next row you go to increases the tempo by about maybe 8 or 10%. It's a little bit different for each one, but each one progresses to the next. 36 goes to 42, goes to 48, 54, 63, 72, 84, 96, 108. That's a perfect progression because it doesn't include any of these and it doesn't include any of these. So it's totally void of base 10 numbers here. So you see that these numbers can be found everywhere else. So now let me explain how this works. So you have a fastest common note value. This is the fast note. You group it into twos, it goes this fast. You group this into threes, it goes that fast. You group this into fours, it goes that fast. You group this into sixes, it goes that fast. So you see that each one of these fastest common note values increases proportionally. So there's no, it's not, so each tempo is sort of, midway between the other two. When you look at a chart like this, or this, that doesn't happen because because the fractional values mess up the whole table. This is the only table like this that can be devised that consists of whole numbers and that each row gets gradually a little bit faster at the same proportion. For example, if you have a quarter note moving at 84, the 16th notes are going 336. Now if you have 3/8 time, let's say 3/8 time, and the dotted quarter note or one measure moves at 56. That's in the same row. See? So that means that a dotted quarter that goes 56 is those 16th notes move at the same speed as like a piece in 4/4 with 16th notes. So those are equal in value, see? So in being a composer and wanting to devise a system, that's absolutely necessary, that it is absolutely essential that all numbers in this matrix are able to, be divided the twos, threes, fours, and sixes without having any fractional values. This is the only such matrix that exists. So this is why I believe that Bach used this matrix. Now, the reasoning I'm using is more that if Bach used a proportional system of tempo, if he did that, then this would be the matrix he used. So there's no way of proving that he actually did, but all I'm saying is if he did, it would have to be this matrix here. So my whole tempo theory is based around using this matrix as a sort of axiom, assuming only these tempos, and then seeing what happens when you apply these tempos to Bach's music. And you can see what happens. When you apply all these tempos to Bach's music, you discover all of these duration ratios, which are not, in no way are they coincidental, because they happen so frequently at such small margins of error. So basically, by applying this matrix of tempos to Bach's works, you achieve a result, and then that result sort of proves your initial hypothesis. So that's sort of the approach that I'm taking here. So thank you for viewing this.